Hey guys, so a friend of mine gave me this Xbox 360 for free, but there's a good reason why he gave it to me for free, and I'll show you right now. Switch it on, and we get a one-segment red ring of death, and the following warning, E74. So what I'm going to do is take it apart and fix it. Okay, so we've taken apart the motherboard from the case of the Xbox 360, and this is generally the problem. It's what causes the E74 one. It's on the GPU, which I believe is this one is the GPU here. And what this is underneath. This is the underneath of the board, and these are this funky design that Microsoft came up with. These X-Cross braces to hold the heat sinks, which is on the other side of the board. The heat sinks. Hold the heat sinks on. Now unfortunately what would happen is the chip would heat up as it was being used, but at a different rate to the Xbox X-Cross retainer, which meant that the board would flex and as it was heating up, and then flatten out as it cooled down, and then flex and flatten out, and over time it ruins the connections between the chips and the board, which creates all these red ring of deaths and all sorts of other problems. So what I'm going to do is remove these and replace it with some other different, just for washers, nuts, and that should stop the board. Well, the board will still flex, but then the heatsink won't be held in place and it won't distort the board anymore. But also what we've got to do is reflow the solder underneath there to stop it from happening even further. Okay, so after much cursing, swearing and prying, I managed to get off these X-clamps from underneath the motherboard, which means I'm now able to take off the heat sinks. What I'm left with now is the bare board, and there's the two chips. I think the offending one, I believe, is this one. I think this is the GPU. So what I'm going to do is clean off all the thermal paste and hit this motherboard, concentrating on these areas mostly, with trusty friend, the heat gun. So what the idea is to use the heat gun here to heat up the solder that's underneath these chips, so that as it heats up, it remelts and makes another, again, a solid connection. And then we move on to the next step. Okay, so I've got my motherboard ready to be reflowed. So what I've done is I've bubble wrapped it. There's bubble wrap underneath here, and blue tack for insulation, because there's a lot of capacitors around here. If you get them too hot, they might pop or explode. And what I'm going to do is just heat up with a circular motion these chips as Northbridge and Anna and GPU and CPU chips. Just going to heat that up on a medium heat, about 200 degrees C, for about 3 minutes, and then pop it onto high for 30 seconds, and then walk away for 45 minutes just to let it all cool down. The most important thing is to not touch it straight after you've reflown it, because you don't want everything to shift if it's still all melted. Hopefully I won't set fire to the house, so wish me luck. Okay, so I've reflowed the board and I've put the heat sinks back on. I put some more thermal paste back on. This is some silver thermal paste. Should be a little bit better than the stock stuff. So I put that on, and what I've also done is I've secured these on with an X-clamp fix kit, which means that the X-clamps, those big X's that were across the back of the motherboard, they've gone. I've replaced them with just 4 screws and some new thermal paste. Okay, so before I put all this back together, there's just one last final thing which I'm going to do, and that is these 4 memory chips here. I'm going to put a little thermal pad on each one of these 4 memory chips, and that means that the heat from these memory chips will then transfer through the pad and into the base plate, and hopefully out through the base plate, so that'll help cool it down a little more. And then the last thing I'm going to do, is just on the other side of this board, is these 2 chips, it's the Southbridge and the Hana chips, makes it all work. I'm just going to put little heat sinks on these things like that, stick them on, and what that'll do is that'll just draw the heat up, and then the fans will blow it across the just to make sure that it stays cool as you like, and hopefully the red ring of death will never come back. Okay, so before I go any further, I've got the case, just the bare case there. and I've put everything back together as a bare minimum of everything back together, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we no longer have our red ring of death. Let's switch it on. Thinking about it. We've got the green lights and Xbox 360. The fan seems to be making a weird noise, but that's probably because I haven't put it back together properly. Cool. There we go, one fixed Xbox. So I've done some investigation into the buzzing noise, and it's been on now for about 25 minutes and it seems fine, but the buzzing noise is in fact, you can see here there's a coil here, it's an inductor coil, and there's one just behind here, and that's what's making the buzzing sound. It's the video one, the one that holds the video signal, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to find another inductor, but it's proving difficult to find. But when I get one I'll install it and hopefully should be back to normal. Right, so what I've done is I've got the old trusty heat gun out on this old broken motherboard which I got off eBay for £5, and use the heat gun on the underside, so I heat up right here, and the inductor dropped right off the board. Obviously I don't mind what happens to this board because it's broken. Unfortunately I care a lot more about this board, and I couldn't get the inductor out fully. I couldn't get the posts out of it no matter how much I tried to heat it up, and I didn't want to use a hot heat gun again on this one, so I left the posts in, and I've soldered on, I don't know if you can see that, I soldered on some wires and the new inductor, replacement inductor back on there, and let's hopefully it stopped that clicking noise. So we switch her on. Well, it's still there, but it's not nearly as bad. I don't think I'm ever going to fix it. Probably a MOSFET's gone on it, but it seemed to work quite well without the fixed inductor, and it's certainly a lot less noisy.